The following is a presentation of the Matt Talk Podcast Network.
Welcome to On the Mat. I am Kyle Klingman of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame Dan Gable Museum, joined by a man who is not Stephen Bloom. It's Andy Hamilton of Trackwrestling.com. Welcome to the show, Andrew.
Hello, Kyle. How are you today?
Doing good. You fired up for our interview?
I am so fired up. You going to explain the intro?
I am. Okay. I am. If you would have asked, and you did, you know who Stephen Bloom is.
Yes, I do.
He was a professor for you at the University of Iowa.
Yep.
And you have an interesting mind. So I've always wanted to tap into that mind, but your memory is also interesting too. So sometimes you forget things, you have a ton of things, and then you'll surprise me with me looking up 2016 U.S. Open results and can't find anything. And then you said that was the year they did the U.S. Open in 2015 because they had the Olympic trials in April. You just pulled that out of your hat. So I don't know if you remember, in about 2011, Stephen Bloom wrote this article about the state of Iowa.
I remember.
And so I wanted to pick your brain. There's been a couple times where I've actually still used conversations we've had because I've picked your brain. I had one in 2008 in Las Vegas at the Olympic trials, still a conversation I go back to. But this is one I go back to as well. And you said you were surprised by Stephen Bloom writing this article about Iowa. And I don't know if he ripped Iowa. Some people thought he did, but he gave an honest take on what he thought Iowa was. So I wanted to get your take, and then I found out that he was one of your professors. My recollection is you said that Stephen Bloom is responsible for your journalistic career and your path and what you viewed journalism as. Stephen Bloom was at the top of that list. Is that accurate?
Steve Bloom, I learned more in one class from Steve Bloom than I did in all my other college journalism classes combined. Probably all my other college classes combined, period.
And why was that?
It was just really valuable time. It was a 3-hour Monday night course called News Editorial Problems, and it opened my mind to things that I was not thinking about. It taught me how to really think critically about every sentence I was putting together. Every headline I wrote, all word choices, photo placements, photo selections. Just, I don't think I learned as much in all my other courses combined as I did in that one semester from Steve Bloom.
And so my recollection too is that you said every single time you write something, you use a lesson that Stephen Bloom taught you in that class. Does that still hold true? Or close?
I mean, I think it's just like that class formed the bedrocks of what I believe in from a reporting standpoint. And so, yeah, I guess indirectly. Sure.
So if you want to go and check that out, it's, I think, called 20 Years of Living in Iowa. It's The Atlantic. You can go online and find it. What were your thoughts when you read it? Did you?
I didn't agree. I didn't agree at all. No, but, yeah, I've never had the chance to talk to Steve about it. I didn't like it, but that being said, it doesn't change my opinion of what the guy did for me. So
it shouldn't.
I would love to talk to Steve about it sometime. I haven't read it in several years, so I can't even tell you what was in there. And you're talking about my memory. Every now and then I'll pull something out. This is one where I don't remember a whole lot about it other than I didn't really like the way that our state was portrayed in that piece. Well, but I'm still, like that being said, I'm still really grateful for what the guy did for my career. And I think I think sometimes we're in this, sometimes nowadays we get caught reacting to stuff before you have all the facts and before you gather all the information. And, that's kind of where I sit on that piece is, I'd like to to hear what Steve had to say about it and where he was coming from on some of the points that he made before I cast too much judgment on the piece. But just on the surface, I wasn't. I don't really care for what you wrote here, Steve. But that being said, I'm certainly grateful for what he did.
One of the things Iowa has.
How in the world did you get on this tangent, Kyle?
Well,
I mean, this is way out of left field.
No, it's not, because I don't know if you remember when you came to the museum, I put a message and said Stephen Bloom stopped by, and you kind of caught you off guard because I went back to this conversation we had, and you're like, Stephen Bloom. And so I think you probably wanted to talk to him. I pulled a little trick on you. I probably shouldn't have done it, but I remembered that and I thought, I'm just going to use that for my intro. So that's where it came from. Hey, 23 national championships for Iowa against 34 for Oklahoma State. It's the two greatest legacies in college wrestling history. Penn State's on the cusp. They're doing some great things right now. I'd say there's 3 Division I wrestling dynasties. 2 of them are going head to head. This Sunday, we have John Smith on the program to discuss that. And he's seen a lot as an athlete. He's seen a lot as a coach, and we get a chance to talk to him about both of those elements with John Smith, a true legend in our sport. Can't wait for this.
One of my favorite people to talk to, because there's so many different avenues you can travel down with John Smith, so many different questions you can ask. The coaching element, the competition element, his peers. He's one of the guys that really gets me to think when it comes to rules, too. So I like the fact that he's on the rules committee now. I like that. That's
a big name to have on there. So he gets a chance to influence what happens with the direction of our sport. So we will get to John Smith a little bit later. So stick around for that. But we have a live mailbag. We've never done this before, but we're going to bring in Scott Beck. He's all the way from New York. He's been our most avid mailbag contributor. He gives us a lot of feedback. And so we're going to bring him on the line and talk to him about his journey and just his thoughts about what he wants to see in the sport. Our mailbag guest, Scott Beck, has been our most avid mailbag contributor. He is part of the Beat the Streets board. He wrestled at Harvard. He's part of the wrestling community in numerous ways. You have a daughter that wrestles in the Hawkeye Wrestling Club, Michaela Beck. Welcome to the program, Scott.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Great to have you on. One thing that struck me in our conversations and with your feedback about the show, which we appreciate, was that you have some regrets that you didn't go somewhere else to wrestle. Now, when I think of a world-class education, I think of Harvard. Why was it that you wanted to go elsewhere instead of Harvard?
Well, once I was younger, I first, discovered wrestling, and all I heard about really was legendary Coach Gable and the Iowa program. And I used to follow it, waiting for amateur wrestling news to come many times a week or two after the events to get the results. But that was my dream. And my junior high school coach, Coach Munich, used to talk about the University of Iowa. And unfortunately, I was just not that level, not good enough. And so pretty much a dream unfulfilled, to be honest with you, and that I had to settle to go to Harvard. But it certainly was my dream to attend and wrestle at the University of Iowa.
Settle and go to Harvard, though. That had to be a world-class experience being at Harvard. What did you gain out of that experience, not only academically, but through your wrestling portion of your career?
Well, I mean, our program was okay. We have, we were okay in the Ivies back then. Cornell was very good and we were okay, but that was before the resurgence when University of Pennsylvania got good, and then Cornell just became a behemoth. It's really about life, what you learn there. You're coming from Long Island, New York. It's pretty myopic and kind of a very non-eclectic group of people. And then you go to Harvard and you meet people from all over the world, all over the country. I had teammates from all over the country as well. So, we've also always surrounded ourselves with fairly good assistant coaches over the years. I mean, the past couple of decades, Harvard's had Kendall Cross, Moore, Muzaffar Abdurrahmanov is there now, Beck's brother. But Snyder was there, from Nebraska. So we've had a bunch of good coaches and always good people in and out of the room. When I was there, our assistant was Paul Wiederman, who lost in the Olympic trials to Bobby Weaver. A guy named Sean White, who took fourth twice from Michigan State. I think he lost to Brown from Iowa State twice. So we've always had, a good eclectic crowd, so to speak. And that's what I think the biggest thing to learn there is.
You're the president of Decoy Capital Markets. What is that?
It's a small broker-dealer, a minority broker-dealer, actually. The president's a guy named Craig Spivey, who wrestled at North Carolina State. He was an ACC champ his sophomore year, and I think a national prep champ from St. Paul's. And ultimately, he played lacrosse. He transferred to Brown. But so it's a small little firm. I mean, my career was really at big banks on Wall Street, at Goldman Sachs, Lehman Brothers, Bank of America, and kind of now I'm phasing into a different part of my career where I do some private investing and trading and small activities through this small broker-dealer.
Do your group of friends, do they know you're such a wrestling junkie?
Yeah, they do a little bit. Yeah, and it's progressed over the years. When I was younger, it kind of died down a little bit after college, but it certainly picked up in the last 5 to 10 years as I guess my daughter's activities rekindled my interest. But even before she was wrestling, I got back pulled in with Beat the Streets about 10 years ago when Al Bevilacqua kind of pulled me into the organization.
What's it like having a daughter that wrestles?
It's a lot of fun on a couple of counts. Number one, it certainly has pulled me back into the sport, but it's given me an appreciation on a couple of levels. Number one, for how far the women have come. I remember watching women's wrestling in the World Championships in the Garden in '93, and boy, it's come a long way where I actually truly enjoy watching women's wrestling and high school girls wrestling and young youth wrestling. And they've just improved so much, and there's a lot of resources being given to it. And in general, just being reconnected to wrestling, just the level of the talent now is unbelievable. I guess with the advent of private coaches and video, it's just amazing to see just, how far our sport's come and how good people are at young ages.
Beat the Streets has really taken a life of its own. You're part of that. Give us a couple stories that you've gotten out of that have been inspirational and that have taken the sport to another level.
Some of the best stories, obviously we have these big events like the Gala, which, is a major event every year. This year, just to plug that, it's going to be on May 6th, in a different venue, the Hula Theater. And those big events are always nice. But the biggest stories for me are when I get to really talk to the kids and see their growth. You can watch a kid that first starts practicing isn't that good get better and just start to believe in themselves, and their confidence as people increases. And that, to me, is what I like to see. A kid that starts talking to adults or goes on the mat with confidence at a tournament, whether it could be at a Fargo or a local tournament. Also getting, the most rewarding stories as well are sometimes just talking to parents where I've befriended a bunch, and I always try to go out of my way and having a genuine thanks for a parent that says, listen, you've really changed my kid's life and put them in a direction which maybe I wasn't in a position to do by myself. And when I say you, I don't mean me, Scott Beck. I mean us, the organization, led by, Brendan Buckley, our tremendous coaches, and, Jackie Davis is always, when she was a women's coach. We now have Emma Randall. Just a lot of great, leadership and people that really care about the kids.
One of the mailbag items that we were unable to get to last week was you had some comments about the scoring for international and the way that the criteria is implemented. Take us through what you're thinking on with the criteria and why you don't like that last point scored criteria in freestyle wrestling.
Well, I think it can sometimes, it's a last point scored in combination with, what defines, a push out. Sometimes you'll see towards the end of matches where somebody is down 2 points and or down a point and they're about to get a final takedown. They can have the person in serious jeopardy, whether they have a leg up in the air or they have in a quad pod. And, I don't want to get into this almost takedown stuff again, but where it's literally like they're 98% about to score, the person can crawl out of bounds in a quad pod or hop out. And instead of that being a winning takedown, that kind of just becomes, at 1 point, even if they call fleeing the hold and give a caution, the person loses the match. And in essence, they pretty much had a takedown. The person kind of ran out of bounds. So, that's a tricky situation. I do agree with both of you guys and the debate you had. The rules have probably never been better. When you start tweaking them too much, we get back in the danger of confusing fans. So, that's the one pet peeve I have where somebody does so much work and then somebody crawls out of bounds, and especially you see that many times in the last 20, 30 seconds of a match where somebody's got that one last gas takedown attempt and gets so close and then somebody kind of, flees, out of bounds and then loses the match when they, in essence, maybe if there was more continuation or something would have lost.
How many times have you seen that this year, Scott? I don't recall seeing that situation.
Maybe not this year because we're not really in freestyle, as much, but a bunch of matches. I'm trying to think of a specific match. Maybe one of the Rashidov matches or something like that at the end where there's playing. I'm trying to. I don't think it was against Goya, but it's hard to bring them on a specific example. But I've seen that a few times, and maybe it's not all that often. But when it does happen, it kind of irks me so much that I make a note of it in my head. But I can't think of specific off the top of my head instances.
All right, who's the greatest wrestler to come out of New York?
The greatest wrestler in New York. Ooh. Ed Bannock's got to be up there. I'm trying to, Bannock's are pretty tough. Ed, 3-time NCAA champ, Olympic champion, Iowa Hawkeye. Who do you guys think is?
I would probably go with Ed. That seems right up there. There's some,
Kyle Dake's putting himself in the conversation.
Yeah, well, I think Kyle Dake will be. He certainly was, obviously won the world title. We'll see what happens. It's going to be very competitive. We'll see what happens in the Olympic team. I certainly think the match with him, if it goes down to 74 with Burroughs, would be very interesting. And, he's had that situation where he's had JB, in his weight class. But he's certainly going to be up there, certainly in the conversation, no doubt.
I'll tell you what. Wrestling, it's a sport like no other, and I think you get that as much as any. When you get the chance to be part of this sport and see all the great stories, it's just got to be fun for you to see how much wrestling influences people on in their day-to-day lives.
It's amazing. I'll tell you a funny little anecdote. To me, it changed my life dramatically. Reconnecting with it brings me immense happiness that I can't even describe. It's just such an important part of my life, and especially for somebody that's not even in the scheme of wrestling, really done anything or been that good, but I love it. And what I always say to my wife, because she thinks I'm a fanatic, and I tell her, I said, you have no clue. I'm nothing in the sport of wrestling. There are people that are so much more involved, whether it be on a literally part of their life or just on a fanatical fan basis. So I'm into it, and it has great stories and moments. But I think there are people that are levels beyond me. But it certainly brings me a lot of joy.
Scott, the Hawkeye Wrestling Club has certainly ramped up its emphasis on women's wrestling here in the last year, 2 years. What has Michaela's experience been like in Iowa City?
I'm not going to too much speak for her, but I'll just broadly say it's been phenomenal. She is just that is the best place for her on the planet. I think she would say, and I would say, the embracing and the coaching of Coach Perry, the Brands brothers, Coach Telford, among many others. The embracing of the women, making them feel comfortable. And the tone, I always say this, the tone comes at the top from the Brands brothers and Coach Perry. And the women are not thrown in a corner. They're welcome. They're part of events with the coaches, the wrestlers, their girlfriends, the families. So it's really a family situation. They have tremendous support. It's viewed as a unit, and she just feels very embraced and empowered, and she believes she's in an environment where she has the best chance to achieve her goals, and with tremendous support. So for us, it's been perfect. Now, it is a very intense environment and an intense room, so it may not be for everybody, but for her, it's literally the best place on the planet, we believe.
Scott Beck, thanks for coming on this live mailbag. Keep throwing us questions. Keep giving us feedback. We appreciate you being involved and being a listener. And I think the first time I'm going to meet you is at the U.S. Open, so we'll see you out in Vegas.
Yeah, definitely. Guys, thanks for having me, and keep up the good work. I really appreciate what you both do for the sport of wrestling. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was Scott Beck for a live edition of our mailbag, and you can really feel the drive that he has. He tries to act like there's people that are way above him as far as his motivation for the sport. I don't know that anyone gets more motivated or has more drive in the sport than Scott Beck. That was cool.
Yeah, I'm glad you did that, Kyle. You've said several weeks here in a row that Scott mentioned this or Scott mentioned that. It was good to have him on, right?
Yeah, it's cool, especially since he has a unique story of his own that Michaela, his daughter, is taking a path I don't think I've seen. Just go right out of high school into a wrestling club that's not the OTC. We've seen that with Kyle Snyder, and Henry Cejudo is probably the best example, but to actually go to an RTC and forego college for now and say, I'm going all in on the sport. And I think a guy that would be proud of that path would be Jay Robinson. He's always said, you only have your athletic prime for so long. Why not go all in on that time of your life and make the most out of that athletic potential? Because you can get a college degree when you're 50 if you want. You can't be athletically great when you're 50. So take advantage of the years that we have.
I don't know about you, Kyle. I think you could still be athletically great
in
what sport? 50.
What sport?
Any sport you want to be.
Really?
You're fit as a fiddle.
Do you think I could take the Jamaican at the World Championship? You think you could? I don't know.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, I don't think
I think you could.
I don't think I could take that Jamaican. I think he would beat me.
Are we talking an endurance race? You hands down, Kyle.
Well, if it was an endurance race, I think I could. But I'm beat up, man. I get a little beat up. Probably the guy that's the most beat up, he referenced him as Mark Perry. I wish he would have kept competing, but I think he's a little beat up. He said that before, that he's kind of the walking wounded a little bit.
Did you drive over here today? Did you ride your bike or did you snowshoe?
I drove today.
Wow.
Last week I was snowshoeing. I think the week before biking. So we're mixing it up a little bit on the path of most resistance to your house.
Okay.
So this was the least resistance today.
Okay.
But last week we have to talk about this. We had recorded the show. I would say 1 to 2 hours later, we got a text from Joe Russell saying that he was listening.
Several hours later, because we went and we cleared your drive.
Okay, so several hours after the show.
But we got
a text from Joe Russell, and he had some comments about the show that he was listening and pretty much said, I didn't sleep during that 0-1, because the reference was, we said that Joe Russell probably wasn't sleeping after losing the team point, where we said the team point probably doesn't matter that much through the course of a dual meet or a tournament. And I made the reference that Joe Russell and Mark Schwab lost a team point at the 2001 NCAA championships. And it was a tight team race between Minnesota and Iowa. And my comment was, I guarantee you that Joe Russell and Mark Schwab weren't sleeping well that night before. And so Joe chimed in and said, you're right. I wasn't sleeping well at all that night before. And he was listening, I think, in the deep of the night. So on
the way through Nebraska, right?
Yeah, I don't know if you...
I think I was trying to find the text. I can't find it in here.
Now, I got to compliment you on your 7 minutes interview with Mike Macchiavello. I read and reread that one. I got so much entertainment value out of reading that. There were 3 questions in particular. The whole interview was good, but the one that stood out to me when he was talking about wrestling Tommy Gant in practice, and they went into a table and the coffee spilled over him. When I read that, I said to myself, this is why I love this sport. Go read that. And you got to be part of that. Was it as fun listening to it as it was for me reading it?
Yeah, absolutely. And Mike did such a great job of telling that story that you can picture it in your mind.
Oh,
you
man.
can picture bagels flying and hot coffee spilling all over him. And they just continue to wrestle.
I love that. So go find that. And then the other part I liked was when he said he regretted his walkout music.
For the NCAA championships last year.
Yeah, he regretted it. I love the insight, and when someone has that ability to articulate what was going through his head, because that's what's fun about those 7-minute interviews, is that you get to really get inside these guys' heads. And you only get to see the match when we're out there. We get to watch a match unfold, and you say certain things and say, hey, this guy, he wasn't mentally there, he gassed, and we think certain things. But these interviews, the questions are good because it gets deep into that person's psyche, and you get to learn more about what they were thinking. And I think Mike Macchiavello, of all the ones you've done, I think, what was that, number 67?
63, I think, maybe.
63. That's been my favorite so far. I just thought he captured some elements of the sport that I hadn't seen in other ones, and I just enjoyed that thoroughly.
Yeah, and he's think I speak for you too. One of like our favorite guys in this sport, right? I mean, the time that we got to spend with him in Budapest, it's the first time that I'd really ever spent around Mike, and probably for you too. And
it was, yeah.
Just spent a lot of time hanging out with him at the practice facility there a couple days before the tournament, and then up on our what do we call it, the 7th floor lounge, right outside the elevator, where him and Jacob Casper and Obi Blanc were hanging out most of the week because that was the best place to get Wi-Fi on our floor. But yeah, Mike's just a tremendous guy, and he's got such a unique perspective, really motivated to get better in a lot of different segments of his life. And I'm fascinated by the questions that he asks, and he uses the opportunity that he has with other guys on the world team to pick their brains on a lot of different stuff, and takes notes, and sounds like it doesn't just go for world teamers, but it's people in leadership roles and other areas of just ways that he can improve as not just a wrestler, a leader, a communicator, and really intrigued by a guy whose mind works like that at the age of 24. It's impressive.
And think about the journey of just 1 year where he was a little bit on our radar when he beat Colin Moore, and then he wins the NCAA championship after just getting to the round of 12. And now we're talking about him consistently. We've had him on the show. You had him for 7 minutes. We're talking about him again. That just shows you he's doing the right things to stay relevant for a guy that was a one-time state champion and was recruited as depth from Pat Popolizio, and now we're big fans of his. It shows you that he's doing a lot of the right things.
Yeah, what did he say in the interview the other day? Like it was Bucknell and Virginia recruited him a little bit, and Appalachian State had some opportunities maybe in football too, but comes in 20-22, his first 2 seasons, loses his job to a guy who's younger than him. And then he winds up winning a national title a couple years later. That's an incredible story.
Against a guy that had beat him twice previous, I believe.
Yeah.
And Haught from Virginia Tech. So find that interview. It's a great interview on trackwrestling.com. We're about to wind up the dual meet season. We're going to talk to John Smith here momentarily, but as we go into the postseason, maybe just some reflections from you and me just on what's transpired this season. Again, we had another season without the national duels, and we've talked about that and the importance of the national dual meet championships in our mind, how we get that back, how we keep wrestling relevant. We've had some hands to the face calls. You had a really good article about just sportsmanship and post-match antics. As we look back at that, maybe what are you going to remember about the dual meet season so far?
Good question. It's flown by. Seems like wasn't that long ago, we were just getting this thing kicked off, and now we're at the finish line. It's like, where in the world did the last 3 or 4 months go? But it seems like this almost every year.
Well, for me, with you, it seems like it was more of a blur because you were just going international, and you were just maybe not following the college as much because you had to focus on other tournaments. Then it just kind of blurred right into the All-Star meet, and then you were off to the college season. So I think for you, it probably started with that All-Star meet and hasn't stopped. You've kept the pedal on the metal the entire time. What's high school in there? To
your point, we came back from Budapest, and then it was off to the All-Star Classic, and then back over to Romania for the U23s, and then back home for a couple weeks, and then AWL, and then the high school season started, getting into like December, and the high school season starts, and the college season's really getting ramped up, and all of a sudden now you look up and it's 3rd week of February, and we're winding this thing down. We've already had a couple weekends of state tournaments. This past weekend was awesome. There was great action all across the country, some tremendous storylines. I had a chance to speak last night with Jay Spencer, the state champion from Alabama, who's blind, legally blind, and incredible story that is.
On that, though, with being in Alabama, did he touch on what the wrestling landscape is like in Alabama? Because I don't think of Alabama in wrestling by any means.
Yeah, we didn't really talk about it a whole lot, but I can tell you this, just from my experience, it's getting a lot better. There are some really talented young wrestlers down there. Christian Knopp is going to North Carolina State. He finished as a undefeated 4-timer. And we cut up the highlight last week, or I cut it up and put it on our Instagram account and on Facebook and Twitter as well. And he hit a boot scoot that was McElravy-esque. It was really slick. And so the one thing that's interesting about Alabama, though, is just the number of matches that they wrestled down there. It's staggering. I was looking it up the other night. There was a young man by the name of Stephen Bell, a state champion down there, Kyle. He went 91-0 this season.
Why that many? What do you have a reason why?
I don't know why that's, but it's not out of the ordinary. I know, Brandon Womack, All-American from Cornell, 174 pounder. He's from Alabama. He wrestled, if I'm not mistaken, I think he was like 422-8 in high school. And he was wrestling. I know he wrestled some matches when he was in junior high as well to get to that number, but, there were several seasons where he approached 90 matches in a season. So it's fascinating. I know, it seems like at the college level, guys are competing less and less and less. At the high school level, they're competing more and more and more. And so that's an interesting shift in philosophy there. But you look across Iowa, and I was actually listening to, I was watching the state finals the other night, and Mark Ironside was doing commentary on the state finals broadcast here in Iowa, and he made comment about how one of the young men that was in the finals. One of the finalists was like, 55-1 or something along those lines, or it had 58 matches, something like that. And Mark was staggered by that number. And so I sent him a text during a break, and I said, "I got this kid down in Alabama that went 91-0 this year," and he goes, "That can't be right." He goes, "That's got to be career." I'm like, "No, that's one season."
And again, let's put that in perspective. Dan Hodge for 3 years was 46-0 with 36 pins. I always like making that comparison because you just see how far it's come. That 3 years of college wrestling, 46-0, 36 falls. That shows you how far we've come as a sport.
Well, and then go back to like the mid 80s and early 90s. I think of the guys that were all-time greats at Iowa, and Barry Davis and Tom Brands, weren't they around 160 career matches?
Definitely 162 wins for Barry Davis. Yeah. So at least that.
So
maybe,
I don't know that that's a record we're going to see approached anytime soon.
I don't know how. I don't even know if the schedule will allow it anymore. I don't know if you're able to get 40 matches in a season.
Well, maybe not at Iowa, but I know how many Chance Marsteller have last year? He had close to 50 wins, I think.
Yeah, you're right. He was close to that. But even on your Alabama point with 91-0, I just think the amount of matches, no matter what state that is, that's a threshold that is so difficult to maintain all of those matches and to be able to be at that level for that many matches in a high school career, or in this case, a season. You're approaching 400 matches if you start as a freshman. I don't even know when I think about that, how that's possible, just what that would look like from a scheduling point of view, how many times they're out there. You got to think a lot of those are falls and pins, and hopefully they're getting off the mat pretty quick. But man, 91 matches. My mind can't get around that.
I can't either how they cram that many in.
You got Marsteller's record there?
44-4 last season.
So close to 50 there, 48 matches. Yeah, and that's a ton. That's a big number for a season.
Especially in this day and age.
Now, talking about Alabama, going to a state next to it, we know that Mississippi does not have high school wrestling. I would be interested to know, who's that fan down in Mississippi? Is there such thing as a diehard wrestling fan in Mississippi? I'd like to find who that is. I'd like to know who the greatest wrestler to come out of Mississippi is, since they don't have high school wrestling. Do they think about pro wrestling when they think about wrestling? What's that landscape look like, if there is one? I would love to find someone who's a diehard out of Mississippi. Do you think that person exists?
I don't know. I've never thought about this. There's got to be one, right?
Maybe if they moved in there and got a job and they came from somewhere else. But
we need to do our road trip, and we'll stop in Mississippi, Kyle, on the way through somewhere.
We have
on the way from Arkansas to Alabama.
I agree, because Arkansas is coming. It has been for a while here with a program, and I'll tell you what, Greg Hatcher's done some great things, but Mississippi's always fascinated me on, if you went down there and you talk about wrestling, I wonder if there's even a contingent of wrestling fans. I'm not sure that there is. I don't know that you could find that person. If you do and you're listening to this show, will you contact us? I want to know if there's a wrestling fan out there from the state of Mississippi. Please do that for us. What do you think? You think there's 10 of them out there?
I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's under 10.
I don't know.
Mississippi. We have to get to our guests. We want to give full allotment to John Smith. We're going to get to Stillwater, Oklahoma, where the Oklahoma State-Iowa meet will take place this Sunday. Our guest today is a 6-time world and Olympic champion. Got those titles from 1987 to 1992. Also a 2-time NCAA champion. He's the head coach of Oklahoma State, where he's won 5 NCAA team titles, and he is my favorite wrestler of all time, John Smith. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Great to have you on. Are you as excited about this Iowa-Oklahoma State meet as we are?
Yeah. It's we have an opportunity to break our attendance record, which is anytime you have a program that's 100 plus years and you're breaking records, it's always good. So we'll see how it goes. I think we a little bit over 10,000, and we'll end up having a attendance record, which will be a positive. And then of course the dual meet itself, it's always, if you can't get ready for this, I don't know what you can get ready for.
Let's go way back to 1984. Your first time being part of this meet, you had a come from behind victory at 126 pounds, and you were absolutely jacked when you won that match. Take us through what you remember about that and why it was so exciting for you to get that win.
Yeah, Trezino, right?
Yep.
It was actually Trezino, and I was a true freshman. The biggest by far the biggest event I ever been a part of at that time in my career. The team, had some problems during the year with whether they were going to retain Coach Chesbro or not, which was crazy, to think that we were having an undefeated season and didn't know if he was going to be retained or not. And actually that year he didn't get retained. They went undefeated in dual meets. We ended up beating Iowa, and we finished second in the NCAA championship. So give you a little, think about how off people were, but anyway, the event was just an unbelievable experience from the standpoint of, everything that you look forward to when you were young. And of course I watched a lot of OSU matches growing up, and, it definitely fulfilled every expectation I ever had of wrestling in that dual meet.
And that was an Olympic year, so that would have been the 1984 Olympics. Dan Gable was the head coach, and you guys won 24-6. Is that still a dual meet that you hang your hat on and take pride in, that you beat Iowa like that?
Well, you can't, at the time, absolutely. But, when you don't follow it up and win nationals, it's a little bit of it makes the dual meet, there's nothing that changes that it's not special. But when you don't follow up and win the NCAA championship, it kind of, the memory's a little bit different. I'm not saying it's not good, but it'd been nice to win a championship following that dual meet, but we did.
John, you look back all the years you've been in this series. What's your most favorite memory? What's your least favorite memory?
Oh, I got a lot of good memories. I mean, that one being one as a coach, as an athlete, probably the worst memory was me separating my shoulder against Greg Randall. I think it's the only match in my entire career, from the time I was 5 till 26 years old, that I had to forfeit, and walk off the mat in the middle of the match. Greg lifted me up, and at that time, had my arm kind of pinched down against my body and landed right on my shoulder and dislocated it, and was out for really out for about 3.5, almost 4 weeks. And just it wasn't a good experience.
Well, from my perspective, and I think Andy's in the same boat, our greatest dual meet experience ever happened on February 14th, 1998, when Oklahoma State won 22-18 over Iowa in Carver Hawkeye. Gable had just retired. You had Zaleski in. It was an incredible meet. A lot of people have pointed to that meet as the reason they got into the sport. You were a coach in that situation. What do you remember about that great environment and that great meet?
Well, tell me about 98.
Okay, it was the Ben Lee coin flip, West Hand, Papalizio got stalled out and got disqualified.
Oh, and Ben Lee.
Ben Lee. Yep.
Yeah, that's definitely one that sticks out. We made sure that was 98. I just think, it's amazing, that just anyone, here you got a walk-on athlete that came from California, and the reason he came to Oklahoma State was because his coach, Eric Weiss, who wrestled for Oklahoma State, won the NCAA championship, went to school there, and Ben Lee ended up coming to Oklahoma State from nowhere. And when I say nowhere, meaning his potential or his credentials really didn't, he wasn't recruited. And here's a guy that is part of, one of the most exciting meets that we've ever been a part of. And that was the 98, as you said, coming down to him. They stalled Papalizio out, which was crazy that they did that. Still, today, that was crazy that they did that the official did that. And we all knew who the official was.
Chuck Yeagler.
The guy was drinking Kool-Aid, the warning. We actually were shooting. We just told him to shoot. He was shooting and getting called for stalling. So anyway, came down to that one match, and of course the overtime and the so-called whistle start, I guess. I didn't see it that way. I saw Ben Lee win the match.
But how crazy is that when you have a sequence of, you have a returning national champion, Eric Guerrero, Doug Schwab wins that at the end, and then you have Jamil Kelly, who ends up being a silver medalist, get pinned by Ironside. Then you have Steve Schmidt pin Jeff McGinnis, who was a national champion. You almost can't predict that those things would happen. It was that crazy.
It was that crazy, yeah. That's kind of what it's always kind of been like. Not always, but most of the time it is the unexpected. And if it goes your way, you win that dual meet. We've definitely been on the other side of it where we've had several guys, get beat that we thought were W's and ended up losing the dual meet. And so, it's one of those meets that, you need to bring your best to the meet because it's going to take your best.
Well,
and it doesn't really matter if it looks and appears to be a lopsided match. We've seen the outcome of those lopsided matches go the other way.
With a meet like this, where really every match is a toss-up, what's the buzz right now in Stillwater? Are people wanting to ask you about it? Do they want to ask you about matchups? Take us through the vibe in Stillwater going into this great meet.
I think most of it is, they're looking at the 4 out of 5 losses that we've had. Is it time to win another one? Yeah, it's time to win another one. It's at home, and meet appears pretty tight, but you should be winning matches at home. I think the big thing is that people recognize that it's 2 undefeated teams. I think it's more about the team rather than so much the individual. Here we are. It's been a while since we've had a matchup where both teams have been undefeated going into the last match of the year. I'm really pleased that we did move it to the end. That's all Tom Brands, really. He brought it to me and gave me a reason why we should do it, and I bought into it, and I'm glad I did buy into it.
What was the reason why?
He just felt like he wanted, let's put the match at the end. Let's make it a highlight at the end of the year. Everybody's, and it's right, regardless of what our records are, it's going to be a big meet at the end of the year, and it's going to be Oklahoma State and Iowa. And he might have had other reasons that he didn't tell me. But, you know, I think for us, I think it's just a matter of, you know, getting to see Missouri last week and now getting to see Iowa this week. I think it really tells you where you're at, and you have 2 weeks to recover from anything that happens. If you see something, you know, for me, like last week after the Missouri match, saw some things that we definitely had to work on that I didn't see. And it was mostly on bottom position, you know, so it's going to give us something that I identified with that hopefully brings a level of motivation to your student athlete as they go into postseason, which would be the Big 10 or the Big 12.
John, you got 5 pretty good wrestlers for 4 spots there from 65 to 97. How are you going to fit those pieces together for the postseason?
Well, I don't think you do. Somebody's sitting out, you know. I've made it pretty clear we're making a move down. You know, we had to shuffle during the year, and, you know, sometimes I wish I wouldn't take dual meet so serious, you know. That's just me. You know, I wish they had, I wish they were, you know, had some importance in postseason, you know, but the only importance of it is the individual outcomes and where you're seated. So we shuffled around and moved some guys up with the idea that we may bring them back down. I'm glad that the rules allows us to descent back down to our weight class by the conference meet. You guys remember, you know, that was in early February that you had to have that weight down by, what was the date? I don't remember. I think it was the 2nd or, do you guys know?
I think it was the 15th, wasn't it?
Or was it the middle of, yeah. So giving us that extra, you know, 3 weeks is allowed for, you know, and now, you know, it's kind of like, okay, are we going to get any credit for our season? Right now, no, you know, so, you know, that's probably something that needs to be adjusted. If you're allowing for teams to descent down, allowing for an athlete to descent down, we ought to recognize his season. But it is what it is. And, it may be a good thing. I think it's going to end up being a good thing for us. But somebody's going to be sitting out, you know, and I would imagine it'd likely be Joe Smith or Chandler Rogers. I think Jacoby Smith is going to, with being a senior, has solidified that weight, and I'm not sure that anybody can tangle with him right now.
Will the lineup you put on the mat against Iowa be your postseason lineup?
No.
Okay.
No. And that's okay. You know, I think it's a good lineup, and I think it's going to be a lineup that can win, you know. So, again, you know, we've had to do some certain things this year with injuries, and because of that, we're forced to do some things that the rules kind of force us to do, which I'm not saying whether they're good or bad. I think everything should be looked at, but I like what we have, and I like what we're going to put out on Sunday.
How does Dayton Fix compare to other freshmen that have come through your program?
Well, I think you kind of wait and see at the end. I think for the season, he's been really enjoyable from the standpoint of, you know, he's had a tough season. If you look at his weight class and you look who he's wrestled, I think a lot of 33 pounders can say the same thing. You know, there's nothing been easy. You know, I just don't want him to, you know, get separated from the domination that he can in a lot of matches. You know, he's just had a lot of tough matches back to back, and it has been about winning, you know, winning the match. Not, you know, you're not going to dominate, you're going to win this match, and you might win it by 2 points, you know. So it's been something that is, you know, lays a lot on the freshman, week in and week out, but he seems to be able to handle it. Seems to be, he's a winner, and, you know, he's a guy that, he loves to compete, you know, and it shows, every time he steps out.
Nick Piccinini's having a good season. Was that a conscious training decision during the off season where he really felt like he wanted to zero in and get focused on this year?
Oh, I think so. I think he had a rough go last year at Nationals, hitting Spencer Lee, maybe the hottest wrestler in the country at the time, and hitting Lezak from Minnesota in the backside. Two guys that were, I think they ended up first and third. So a little, was it first and third or first and fourth?
First and fourth.
What was it?
Lezak was fourth.
Fourth, yeah. So, he had two good kids that he struggled with during the regular season as well. And I think that was a motivator for him. So, but one thing about this year is that, unlike Fix is just about hit everybody. And until this weekend, Nick has not really had the chance to hit some of the top 10 guys. The schedule, it is what it is, just hasn't allowed for it.
Heavyweight's an interesting matchup because you just have a style difference, a size difference with Derek White and Sam Stoll. What advice do you give your athlete when you go against a physically superior opponent?
At heavyweight?
Yeah.
Well, we really don't know that a whole lot yet, and I'm sure we will later in the week. I haven't seen many of his matches this year. I don't know if he's the same wrestler or if he's a different wrestler, but I think that the good thing is he's had a chance to wrestle him in Iowa City and in Stillwater. So I think they've got he's 0-2 against him, correct?
I think he's 1-1, right? Didn't Stoll injury default, hurt his knee a couple years ago down in Stillwater?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, 1-1. You got to score points, So I think heavyweight, the guy that scores points normally wins. And I will say that Derek he's picked up takedowns, and I believe every match he's competed in this year. So that's a positive as we go forward.
As we talk about heavyweights, we're talking about Iowa, Oklahoma State. You had a unique situation where Steve Mocco went from Iowa to Oklahoma State. Do you feel like he was a better fit at Iowa than Oklahoma State now that you've had a chance to look back at it?
Not necessarily. I think that regardless of who had him, it was a challenge. It was a challenge to get him. To get him to change a little bit from that dominant foot sweep he had, which was very effective, trying to pick up, that second takedown. And that was always, I felt like, Steve had a great career, dominated, probably one of the hardest working guys I've ever been around. I think at both places he kind of struggled finding that second takedown against top quality guys, and a lot of times he would find it in a match, but nothing came easy, seemed like, for him, and that's what even more amazing at both places. He excelled, wrestled at the top, and won at the top. But do I believe that Iowa was a better place than Oklahoma State for him to wrestle at? Absolutely not.
What did you do to challenge him? I've heard that you maybe brought some football players in to hand fight with him. Is that something you used?
Yeah, we brought some football players in, and I just challenged him on his offense. Just fighting to get that next takedown. Fighting to get that snatch single leg, that high crotch. And I always looking at it as like he's going to be an Olympic champion if he can find that second takedown. And so when you really feel that close with a student athlete, you're fighting, man. You're putting the work in and trying to find ways of him being able to score that second takedown. His height, made it a little bit tough for him maybe to always pull people underneath him, especially at the international level with some bigger guys, and the weight class being, wrestling guys that were 6'4", 6'3". So it was going to be a shot. It was going to be a high crotch to a change off. It was going to be a snatch single to running the pike. It was going to be one of those shots that he put a lot of time into. And it was, it was great coaching. It was fun. It was, you don't get a chance to, coach somebody with that attitude, and that determination, that Steve had.
John, so much has been made through the years about Iowa style, Oklahoma State style. Are the two styles more similar now than maybe ever before?
Oh, I don't think. I think, think about mentality. I think more than style, I think when Tom Brands wrestled, won his gold medal, I think Tom Brands went out to score points, and I wasn't any different than that. That's all I could think about was scoring points. So, how you get to a leg or how you do things to score points, might have been a little bit different, but I would come to say we're still an offensive team, and we take pride in scoring points. We take pride in putting points on the board. And we're not a team that's going to sit out there with a forearm on their knee and reaching with their opposite hand and trying to make it a 1-point match or a 1-point takedown. Now, I'm not saying that guys don't go into that mode, but it's darn sure not coached. So are we really that different? Yeah, we're different in maybe a little bit of the style, but in the end, would I say our styles are closer together? I would say, I think, my style, how I wrestle, probably a little bit harder to wrestle if you don't have the flexibility or you don't have some of the things. But, I think the mentality was pretty close. And anytime we get away from that mentality, we're not very good teams. I know that much for my team anyway.
Talking about Tom Brand, you guys will always be linked. You guys were close in age. He was a 96 Olympic champion. You were 88 and 92, same weight class. I've heard you guys played some basketball when he was at Virginia Tech. How did that come about? How did those games go?
Well, I'm pretty sure I won that too. No. Well, I think if you ever seen Tom play basketball, it wasn't too hard to beat him.
Oh man!
But I got a lot of respect for Tom. I think in his time as the head coach at Iowa, especially at Iowa, he's helped wrestling move forward. I can't say that for everybody and every coach that's ever coached, but there's no question he's helped us move forward. And I think we're really enjoying a season that I think can't get much better than what it's been, for wrestling. A lot of attendance across the country. Look at the teams that are in the mix. I often tell my older guys that wrestle for Oklahoma State and that are still living in the 50s and 60s that we are enjoying the good old days of wrestling right now.
Is Tom Brands more skilled as a wrestler than he gets credit for?
Oh, heck yeah. Yeah, way more skilled. Yeah. As good a skill as I've ever, Tom Brands was one of the, I just say this. I wrestled Tom, and the last time we wrestled, I think it ended up being a 10 or 11 or 12-point match. And I remember walking off the mat. I think it was at maybe the trials. It was at the trials. Am I right?
Yeah, it might have been U.S. Open in 91.
Yeah, it was 91. When I walked off the mat, I knew he was going to be an Olympic champion. I felt him, even in that match. I felt the will in him. I felt the discipline in him. Obviously, one of the strongest guys I've ever wrestled, but, I wrestled a lot of strong guys that I didn't feel their will or didn't feel their attitude. With Tom, I just felt like, for me, 92 was the end. It was going to be the end. And I knew when I walked away, that there was a good chance that another American was going to win. And he did. He won in 93, and he went on and won in 96.
How about the American before you? Randy Lewis in 84 won it, and then in 88 you guys wrestled 4 times that year. How did Randy Lewis make you a better wrestler?
Well, he just forced me to go to another position. He always gave you that high crotch, and I was stubborn enough to take it. And the time that he beat me, I took it too many times. It cost me. I would say that I don't know if I really changed technically to beat him as much as I did mentally. I recognized when I started to put him at my level of this guy is as good as me, I mentally took it to a whole nother level. So I don't think I ever really watched films of him. I did, but when I watched films, I never put him out on my level until he beat me. And once he beat me, I quit playing games with myself and realized that this guy could win the spot in '88. And for that reason, it allowed me to, reach a little deeper, and take myself to a different place to win them trials.
Man, that dude has a legendary memory though, doesn't he?
Yeah. Unbelievable. Yeah. He don't forget anything.
He doesn't.
Yeah. I mean, he remembers every detail of the match, and you know what? That's probably what makes him great. That's probably what made him great. He's got a good memory of what the techniques of each guy does, and of course, a guy like him that has no fear, and that educated is good. Those guys capitalize on being educated and recognizing that they know what they got to do to win.
If you were wrestling right now and you had to make that decision at the Olympics of your weight class, 125 and a half or go up to 143, where would you go?
Oh, I don't think it'd be the weight classes. I think a lot of these weight classes that they put in is because we're student athlete, or where the athletes were at the time. Unfortunately, I think that's the way they pick the weight classes. I think in our time going through in 88 through 92, I think, if it was in the middle of that Olympic year, they're going to change weights. I think 136 and a half would have been one of the weights. I think that's the way they kind of pick and choose. I think they went heavy because the Russians wanted it heavy, and we kind of went along with it because we had good guys at the time up there, which I really was discouraging against it, going the opposite way. If you look at what history tells us about, the weight class of 136, why would we not be fighting for that? It's not just John Smith. There's a lot of us, Tom Brands and Randy Lewis, and go back down, go back into the 60s with, bronze medalist from Oklahoma State.
Gene Davis.
Blank. But anyway.
Gene Davis.
What's that?
Gene Davis.
Yeah, Gene Davis. But anyway, we need to continue to fight for more lower weights. I think it's crazy, when we go into the Olympics that there's 2 weights that's under 150 pounds. Crazy. So at one time, when I competed, there was 5 weights, with 149 and a half being the 5th weight. So anyway, that's what I think. I think I'd still be wrestling. I probably would be wrestling 36 and a half because we were good at it. America was good, and we had a good wrestler at it. And I think a lot of the decisions that were based on weight was based on that.
Do you like the rules as they are right now, John? internationally?
Freestyle?
Yeah, freestyle.
Absolutely. Could we get them any better? Yeah, probably. But I like what UWW has done since the disaster in 2011-12. I like the urgency of correcting things. I like the urgency of booting the arrogance out of UWW. There's just been some urgency that's just played out over the last 6-7 years that has put us in a great position to lead now. We're leading. They use us as an example. When I say us, I should say UWW. And we've always had that potential of doing that. That's the makeup of a wrestler. It wasn't the crap that was going on prior to that. And definitely just the opposite of who wrestling was. So, I just say this, the rules can always get better, but they're exciting right now. We need to continue to focus on how we can improve them. And recognize that, with change in style and things of what I've seen over the last 6 or 7 years, I've seen wrestling evolve, going back to evolving again, into new techniques there for the longest period of time. I'd say 12 years. We didn't see wrestling evolve at all, actually go backwards.
What are your thoughts on the college rules?
I like them. I think that, I'm on the rules committee and I got to be a little bit careful about what I say. But I do think that when we pop in rules that just doesn't make a lot of sense, that let's not be afraid to go back and change them quick. Let's be real careful about being stuck on something that just doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think we might have one of those right now. I'm not going to comment on it, but let's just change it. Let's make sure we do the right thing. It shouldn't be the center of attention of the season. And a lot of times people assume that all the wrestlers they're going to eventually change the style to accommodate new rules. Listen, but does that mean it's better? To me, it doesn't mean it's better. So. Anyway, we have rules that need to continue to be tweaked. I think I'd love to see a little bit of a let up now after almost 30 years on weight and weigh in. I don't know if we can get it. I don't know if we can ever get that. But we've seen that we've been allowed to descent to our weight up to conference time. That was good. So we need to change the rules to allow us to take a look at an athlete's season if he does decide he's going to drop down or not drop down. For my guys, 2 of them were already down there. A third wasn't, but his plan was to be there. He was injured. So just continue to stay focused, tweak them, and make sure that we don't get stuck on things that make no sense.
Are we in the best times for wrestling right now?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that maybe there's some statistics that showing some things in high school that are happening. There might be, but I just think the parity has created a lot of interest. It's hard on schools like Oklahoma State or Iowa or Iowa State because, people just assume, you're supposed to be there, which is, that's life though, man. That's legacy and that's tradition, and, I don't mind it, but you do hear some things that just people don't quite understand, but parity is good and it puts a lot of pressure on this historical programs. And we've seen some of them fall from grace, and some of them trying to regain their position in Division I wrestling, but this parity's made a big difference, and I'll say Oklahoma State in the last this past year has wrestled in front of a lot of people at home and away.
You were a world team coach for the women's U.S. team in 2017. Has it been fun to see the women's wrestling movement take off like it has?
Well, I don't know if it's been fun. I think I admire what I've seen over the last several years. And, you know, like many people have come to really respect what I see, you know. I'll be the first to say, you know, I wasn't crazy about it 10 or 12 or 15 years ago. Wasn't sure about it, you know. And then when you get around some of these young ladies that literally have a great passion for wrestling, you watch them work out, you watch how they live day to day, you realize how wrong you were, you know, of even thinking in that direction. And I'll just say, you know, I've just come to appreciate it and really admire, you know, that the women are fighting for their sport. This is their sport too, you know, and it's not just men's anymore. It is the women's sport. You admire their fight of getting noticed, of trying to step out there and make things happen. And I think, you know, they're in the Olympics right now because of their fight. They're likely going to be in Division I because of their fight, and maybe Division II. But it is because they love their sport and they're fighting for it, as we did probably, you know, 25 years ago, and when we were concerned about where we were, you know, and I think there's still a concern about where we are. I don't think we ever have time to let up. But the women have taken a fight to it, and you're seeing the progress of it.
A couple of years ago, you made your comeback match against the women's softball coach at Oklahoma State. I've watched that match 10 times. What was that like, being part of the Matt versus Bat event?
Say that again.
What was it like to be part of that Matt versus Bat event?
Oh, it was fun. You know, I broke my wrist that night, you know, fractured it. They did a little skit that they didn't tell me about, a guy coming back behind me, and they pushed me over a guy that was kneeling below me, and I went back to catch myself and landed on my wrist. But I did finish the match and win. It was fun. You know, Kenny Gajewski, our women's softball coach, you know, I'd do anything for him. You know, he's got great passion for what he's doing. And he took a team that was in the gutter, and I think they're ranked between 13 and 15 right now in the nation. And just love seeing those guys that have real drive, seeing them have success. And anything you can do to help promote them, you know, is it's great for me.
I heard you were sore for a week after that.
That was what?
Sore for a week after that.
I was. Yeah,
you?
Not because of the mat, my wrist.
Okay.
It was my wrist, yeah. And I was sore. You know, he did weigh about 240.
That's a big dude.
You know, I'm sitting about 158, and that's a difference.
Hey, there's a guy
and he didn't know how to wrestle.
Yeah, true. Harder. Yeah. That makes a
like
difference.
Wrestling a drunk sailor.
Yeah. Oh man. Do people still talk about that?
Oh yeah.
Do they?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, no, you got a guy in your program that I think he's awesome. He's your strength coach, Gary Calcagno. What has he brought to your program?
Well, a lot of consistency, you know, and something I probably wasn't real strong on, you know. My views of lifting weights was a lot different than the views of Gary, you know, and so he's a disciplinary guy that loves wrestling. He loves what he's doing. He loves working with our athletes. He makes a difference for them, not just, you know, with their work ethic, but also helps build them into a confident athlete, through lifting, you know, and, he's been with me a long time, and there's been several times that he's had opportunities to go to be head football strength coaches at different universities, and feel real lucky that he's chose to stay with us.
Do you miss the national duels?
Yeah, I miss all duels that has, you know, duels are important for us, you know. I mean, and we're going to hear more and more about that, because I think we're we're kind of going the opposite direction a little bit in high school. I know. You know, when I say that I think we're kind of living some really good times in wrestling, that doesn't mean we don't change and we don't capitalize on what's good. And what's good about wrestling, I think, in college right now is our dual meets. It's not the tournaments. It's not the tournaments that we're going to. It's the dual meets at home that we're wrestling, the interest we have. And we got to remember that, you know, and for that reason, I think it's real important that when you're doing things or you're living some pretty good times, that doesn't mean you don't change. That means you capitalize on where that positive's coming from. And that positive's coming from, like what I said, we wrestled in front of a lot of people this year, you know, at Rutgers, all over, Princeton, you know, West Virginia, wherever we've been, and of course at home. And I'm sure that there's several other teams will say the same thing. Capitalize on that. And the way you capitalize on it is let's make the dual meet a center of attention again. Let's make the dual meet an important event during the year. So let's put some value to it where you go into nationals and there's because of the season that you had, Iowa's getting ready to go, you know, 16-0 or 15-1. I think is it 15 is where they're at
as far as the dual meet record right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The 15-0,
probably 15-0, whatever it is. They're undefeated so
far.
I
think it's 15. Yeah. They're either going to be 15-1 or 16-0, you know, and we're either going to be 14-0 or 13-1, you know. Well, those are two good dual meet seasons. What does it do for you, you know, as you go into postseason, you know, and just if we could find a way to accumulate the dual meet victories that teams are having and a way to put some points forward. And we've tried this before. It got shut down, but I just think it's real important right now. I think that the high schools follow us, you know, and right now, you know, there's not a lot of emphasis at this current time that you have an undefeated season outside of winning a conference trophy for your regular season.
Let's go back to your personal training when you were training for the Worlds and Olympics. I heard you say somewhere that you had to keep it real simple. You gave yourself $1,000 a month to live and train on. What did that do for you mentally to get you prepared to win at the highest level?
Well, I think it just keeps you grounded real quickly. You know, I mean, it's not for me. It was just, you know, I always felt like I had to maintain my work ethic because you keep on winning. I never felt that I was just so talented that I won because of talent. I think I won because of my work ethic and my consistency over a long period of time. You know, and for me, it was about keeping it simple. You know, I mean, all of a sudden, you know, I come from a family of 10. I never had a dime, you know, an extra dime to do anything with. I don't even know if I had the first dime, you know. You know, and all of a sudden, you know, you have a chance to make money, and I was making good money, and because of, you know, early in my career, I was young and I was winning world championships and a lot of opportunities that you have, and trying to manage those opportunities at the same time of trying to train. Sometimes got a little bit complicated. And as it got complicated for me, I just real quickly switched my mind to, you know, I'm going to make this real simple. You know, that I've got this much money to spend in a month on food, room, and board, paying for a car, paying for insurance, and I'm going to stick to it. This was about my third year in, and so my third, fourth, fifth, and sixth year, I lived by that. And it was probably the most valuable thing I could do for myself is, you know, money sometimes can get real complicated for somebody who's never had any. And for me, I made it real simple. You know, this is what you got, and this is all you can spend.
I've also heard you say that when you were training that you would lose track of time, that days would go by, you'd be so focused. Do you think that's a narrative? Do you think athletes conceptualize training that way anymore, that they're that focused that they lose track of time?
Oh, I think so. Yeah, I think you know, any athlete's driven to accomplish something, you know, whether it be a NCAA championship, even a state championship. you're not worried about time. You're not worried about how long you're working out. You're not worried about what day it is. The only thing you might worry about is when is that magical tournament? Is it 3 months away? Is it 4 months away? That may be the only thing you think of is in time. For me, I did lose time of days and even weeks and months, and especially when I knew that nothing was close, and you just absorb yourself into your goals, which for me was, at one time it was to be a world champion. At one time it was to be an Olympic champion. And then at one time it was to be the best wrestler in the world, it didn't seem like, for me that I ever had time to really take my foot off the gas. And for that reason, I just think you just engulf in the things that you really want to accomplish.
John, let's end with this. Let's play a game of the name game. I'm going to give you 5 names. It's a person, place, or thing. You just tell us what you think about this person, place, or thing. Are you ready to play the name game?
Okay. Repeat that one more time.
All right. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you 5 names. It's going to be a person, place, or thing. Once I give you that name, I just want you to tell us what you think about that person, place, or thing.
Okay.
First name, Pat Smith.
The greatest college wrestler ever. How's that?
That sounds good. Name number 2.
You want me to elaborate on it?
Yeah, if you want to. That'd be fun.
I think anytime you do something for the first time, it's harder, than anything. Anybody that came after him wasn't doing something for the first time. It's been done before. And for that reason, I think that don't ever underestimate how tough this guy was to get that done. I tell a story often. I tell a story often that Mark Branch, the year Mark Branch won the NCAA championship was the year Pat won 4. Mark Branch started to beat him the week before the NCAA championships. And I thought there was no chance of what it did to Pat that week was unbelievable from the standpoint of just dropping his level of confidence. What it did for Mark Branch was unbelievable. But how tough Pat Smith was, you just can't underestimate.
All right. Name number 2, Dave Schultz.
A technician, has been given credit for a lot of technique and well deserving. I think he was probably, one of the first guys I was ever around that brought a level of technique that made so much sense to me. Not that I wasn't learning something at Oklahoma State, but just you knew there was a level above, and this guy had that to offer. And for me, it was a leg lace. He showed me some detailed things, and we spent several hours together working on some detailed things of the leg lace. And the things he didn't know, he got me in front of a couple of Russians, lightweights that were at the time were excellent leg lacers. But Dave Schultz to me was about skill and technique, and he lived that out in his wrestling career.
All right. Name number 3, Rich Bender.
That's interesting. One of my best friends, Rich and I were born on the same day. We're the same age. He was part of my journey. He was working at USA Wrestling. He was always trying to get me in these dual meets. And, at times I didn't want to wrestle. And, I'd tell him one thing and then probably do another thing because I decided I wasn't ready or something, so he had to dance around a lot of things. And for that, I've always been close to him because I think he took good care of me when, during my 6-year run, he took real good care of me. He protected me even when I did stuff I shouldn't have done, and I'm talking about committing to something and backing out and not being too hard and them not being too hard on me. He's a leader. When he speaks, the world listens in the sport. and he's moved USA Wrestling forward in a time when it has struggled. He has created an environment at USA Wrestling for everyone in the nation that can go to a website and learn about our sport. Safe sport is becoming a big issue. They've been on top of that from the day one. And we have one organization in the sport of wrestling in this nation that educates you, that forces coaches to be background checked, and forces coaches to be continuing their education in the sport. So Rich Bender to me is a real hero in wrestling right now.
Name number 4, Jordan Burroughs.
Well, Jordan Burroughs. You'd think that'd be easy for me. I'm trying to what direction I want to talk about with him. I would say he's an innovator. His style is innovating. He's got speed, but at the same time, he's got just dominating defense. He's a humble guy that people love to hear. The way he's addressed his championships, the way he addressed each and every match. It's not, I don't think it was the way I was or the way Tom Brands was, or it's Jordan Burroughs. It's the way he is. And he connects to a lot of people because of the way he addresses people, the way he addresses wrestling, the way he addresses his championships. And for that reason, he's been, wow, what a time. He's been the face of wrestling because of it. And it's kind of changed maybe changed the look of wrestling. And Jordan Burroughs has changed the look of wrestling in a positive way. It's better now than when he wasn't, the great Jordan Burroughs. But when he became great, he changed the look of wrestling in a positive way.
Final name, Dan Gable.
Well, I have great respect for him. I had a chance to coach against him. Of course, I competed against his wrestlers. Nothing was ever easy with Dan Gable, including, a lot of different situations, it wasn't easy early in my career. It wasn't easy trying to follow that guy. When Oklahoma State was expecting me to win, I was just sitting back going, do you know who I'm competing against? Not that didn't motivate me. But he made it tough on me, those early years, trying to get in there, and we were able to do it in 94, but, in the years, we won a lot of dual meets, but didn't win a lot of championships. And those were tough years, but it was also, there was a reason for it, and his name's Dan Gable. But he motivated, I think, when you think about Jordan Burroughs, you could say the same thing for Dan Gable, in the early 70s. He was the face of wrestling, and the way he dealt with his wins and the way he dealt with his one loss or a couple losses, really brought wrestling and the image of wrestling to a whole nother level. And, one of the great ones of all time. I mean, we all know that, and there's no question that he set examples. He set standards, and I think we still talk about those standards, and we still talk about some of those records that he did set.
John, thanks so much for this time. One thing I can guarantee is that I'm not going to have Andy get down on all fours, and I will not push you over his back, okay?
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Hey, we appreciate the time and all the best this weekend. It's going to be a great duel.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, John. It was John Smith, head wrestling coach at Oklahoma State, 6-time world and Olympic champion. Andy, we had a chance to get insight from him, and it left me nothing less than exhilarated listening to that interview.
We talked to him for 53 minutes there, and we could probably, I can think of 15 questions right now that I wanted to ask him, but we'll get to hopefully at some point in time in the future.
Write them down because I want to hear what they were. We really could have kept going with John and really appreciated his candor there. There's a lot of information that I hadn't heard him disclose before, talking about how he knew Tom Brands was going to be an Olympic champion.
Wow.
I didn't know he thought that level, because when you beat a guy 14-4, you're probably not thinking this guy's going to be an Olympic champion, but he saw something in Tom Brands. And if you watch that match, you can see it. You can see he was relentless. Tom went down early and could have easily given up, but you saw Tom Brands' mentality in that match come through, and you saw a guy that was going to have an iron will throughout and came back and actually got 4 points late in the match. So do yourself a favor, watch that match, and you probably can see glimpses of what John Smith saw in Tom.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool how when you're surrounded with greatness, when you're trying to achieve greatness, whether it be what John was doing in the early 90s individually, or as he was talking about at the end of the interview with Gable, it forces everybody competing with him to get on a higher level. And you think of where the Big Ten was, 1983, Iowa won 9 weight classes, lost 2 matches in the tournament. Rico Ciparelli, I think, finished 5th. Otherwise, the Hawkeyes swept every match in the tournament. Now you look at the Big Tens, how many programs have raised their level throughout the last 35, 36 years just because of where Gable's program was. And I think that certainly you can probably, if you were to ask Tom Brands, I think he would probably say that John Smith was a big reason why he accomplished some of the things that he did internationally. And trying to get to that level.
And it reciprocates. I've heard Tom Brands say that John is one of those guys that he has unbelievable admiration for, just like John had said about Tom. So it goes both ways. It's been fun interview today. For Andrew Hamilton of Track Wrestling, I'm Kyle Klingman. You have been listening to On the Mat.
This show is part of the Mat Talk Podcast Network. For more wrestling podcasts, head over to MatTalkOnline.com.